David, welcome and thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you here in conjunction with the upcoming exhibition presented by Charles Nodrum Gallery, featuring works by David Rankin and Port Jackson Press. This exhibition celebrates not only an extraordinary body of work, but also the vision behind Port Jackson Press and its lasting contribution to Australian printmaking. As both an artist and the founder of Port Jackson Press, you played a pivotal role in fostering collaborations between artists and master printmakers, helping to make fine art printmaking more widely accessible while producing works of exceptional quality. Today, we'd like to look back at the origins of Port Jackson Press, the philosophy that shaped it, and some of the stories behind the artists and prints featured in this exhibition. So let's dive right in.
Right.
Where did you get the idea for the business model for Port Jackson Press? Was it an obvious gap in the market that you saw and wanted to fill, or had you been inspired by the Atelier publisher model that existed overseas?
No, I really wasn't inspired by those elements. What was truly moving me very deeply was this was a period of egalitarian freedom for people. You know, John Lennon said, "Power to the people." It was very much art for people, not for elites, not for museums, not for wealthy corporations, but art for people. And everyone could participate, everyone could try, everyone could be involved. You know, we could on the kitchen table work on some lino prints or woodcut prints. So it was a very much an egalitarian time. And I'd been working with a woman, an artist called Sue Buckley. Sue was at the Workshop Art Centre in Willoughby in New York. In Sydney. And she taught me how to make prints. I worked with her on lithographs, on woodblock prints, and it was she was very much, her model and her idea was to work with the community and for everybody to be able to participate. So I was working with her. I was also teaching a painting class there at the Workshop Art Centre. And at that stage, I was thinking about working on some of my own prints in a slightly more private way. And I heard about the Miller Street Print Workshop, and so I went to visit them, and
they were where?
They were on Miller Street in North Sydney, which is just down the road from Willoughby. Yeah. And I went there and I met Max, and we got on like a house on fire. We understood, had similar values, similar ideas. And so I was really excited about working there. And then he told me that he and his partners in the studio had decided that they were not going to participate, sort of keep the studio open. That in fact, they had been thinking about closing the studio because it was really federal arts grant dependent. And they felt like there was not enough people using the studio to warrant having federal arts grants to keep going. And I said, and I was sort of, I've only just discovered you. I really want to work here. And I said, well, can't you make some income in other ways? And Max said to me, what do you mean? And I'd been, because I loved printmaking, I'd been looking at all of these different print studios around the world in the art magazines that we used to get in those days, Art in America and Art Forum, Art News. And so I saw studios in publishers and studios in California, in Los Angeles, Gemini Gel, which was a fabulous studio, and I really loved what they did. There was another one in London called Petersburg Press that published David Hockney and other English artists that were my contemporaries at that time. And so I thought, oh, well, if they can do it, maybe we can do something similarly here. Maybe we can just bring more artists in. It'll be a much more, community-based thing, more artists. We can produce work together and then try to sell the work and bring some income into the studio. And Max and Rose Vickers, who was another partner there, both were, oh, that's a great idea. You better do it. And I said, no. Well, let's do this as a cooperative. And they said, no. We don't want to do any more than we're already doing. If you think that's a great idea and we think it's a great idea, then we'll cooperate. But you've got to you've got to do the work. So right. I thought, okay, all right, okay. So that's on you. Yeah, exactly. So then that threw it back on me, and I thought, okay, how do I do this? And I thought, I don't have any money. They don't have any money. It's got to be a cooperative all the way down the line. Any artists that we invite in, they've got to be on the cooperative basis as well. So, whatever income comes in from commissioning, editioning, and then selling work, that's got to be split up in a cooperative way. A percentage goes to the studio, a percentage goes to the Port Jackson Press as a publisher, and a percentage has got to go to the artist, obviously paramountly the artist. And so the reason I chose the name Port Jackson Press was because I think I was probably inspired by Petersburg Press. I thought, oh, Port Jackson Press gives it a location, lets people in London and California know that there's a publisher of prints in Australia. So we set up Port Jackson Press, and the first artist I decided to approach, I thought, I've got to have somebody who's got really strong credibility as an artist and as a person, as an entity within the art community. And so I approached Lloyd Rees, and Lloyd was very gracious and very, very sweet, and we had a great afternoon tea together. But he said not, he wasn't able to do it at that time. So my next choice was to go and approach John Olsen, and I rang him up and went to visit him. I didn't know him at that stage, so I was introducing myself to him, and I went to visit him, and I went there, drove down to his place in the gully up north of Sydney, and I put the proposition to him, would you like to come and work in the studio? We'll work together, we'll make some prints, we'll try to sell some, and we'll see how we go. And I loved his work. I loved his graphic energy, he was a natural calligrapher, and he'd made some prints before. So I thought, he's a great option. So it was actually very sweet. Years and years later, his wife said to me, that first day that you came down the valley, that really, after you left, John was in tears for the rest of the day. For him, he felt like no young artists were interested in what he was doing anymore. And so it was a really emotional event, us all getting together cooperatively and working together. Yeah, it was really, really touching.
I mean, you've spoken about how egalitarianism really has been such a huge part of how you approached the business.
Well, it was something that, I'd really sort of matured in an immature kind of way as a painter living in Burke in, far northwestern New South Wales. So I really didn't have, any sense of or sensibility of understanding of what an art community was. So when I got to Sydney, a year or two later, the idea of being part of a community of artists was very, very important to me, because I didn't go to art school, I didn't go to university, I didn't, I had, only my own resources and a few friendships who encouraged me. But so there I was now working with, introducing John Olsen to Max Miller and Rose Vickers, and setting up, working on our very, very first editions. So that was the background of, the sensibility, the ethos, and even the naming of it, why it was called Port Jackson Press.
You must have some incredible stories to reflect on. I mean, you really have represented some of, I mean, in your time at the press, some of the incredible artists
Absolutely.
that are also part of this exhibition. At John Olsen, as you mentioned, James Gleason,
right,
Frank Hodgkinson, David
yep.
Miller Boomer.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the highlights? I'm sure you've got great stories. Maybe some of the challenges that you faced as part of the press?
Well, I won't repeat all the scurrilous stories, but running
maybe a tinge.
Running a print studio with a gang of artists and printmakers and friends and associated family, and it can get a little bit hairy at times, but but on the whole, people loved and were committed very much to the ethos of craft, of art, of what etching meant, what it was, because that really was the main medium in the studio to start with. And so Max Miller's immense and deep experience and knowledge and commitment, almost mystical abilities with etching, were deeply respected by all of the artists. I mean, Lloyd loved working with him. John, thought that Max was just like some semi-divine creature who could work on plates. So it was really very, very special. Lloyd, when he came, first of all, I got him to come to the studio.
Yeah, I want to hear more about how you lured him in, how you changed his mind.
I went to ask him a second time about working together. He said, "David, I'm too old to learn any new techniques. So I'm sorry, but I can't do it, David." And I thought, okay, Lloyd, I think you've got more miles in you than you think, but I won't push it. So I said, "Lloyd, you know what? Why don't you, just as a guest, we've got other people working in the studio at the moment, come as a guest for afternoon tea." I said, just come for afternoon tea. We'll all make an afternoon tea and enjoy a visit together. And I thought, he's an Edwardian gentleman. He can't refuse an offer of afternoon tea.
Very sly move there.
But before Lloyd came for afternoon tea, I said to Max, there's a technique called soft ground etching, and it means that you just simply put a soft wax on an etching plate, and then on top of that you place a piece of paper and you draw on the paper with a bit of pressure, and where you're drawing the line picks up the wax off the surface of the plate. So there's a wax surface that protects the plate where the artist has drawn. It's broken open, that wax, so that's where the acid can get through and actually etch the plate. So it's called a soft ground etching. And when I said to Max, we'll get underway with the afternoon tea, and then at halfway through, can you just go and get the soft ground etching plate that we've prepared and bring it over to me and I'll have a look at it. This is, ostensibly, irrelevant to Lloyd Rees. So anyway, halfway through, Max got the plate, brought it over to the table, and I'm holding it, looking at it as though this is a very serious issue. I'm thinking about this soft ground plate. And Lloyd said, what is that, David? And I showed him the plate. I said, look, this is a wonderful technique, Lloyd. Simply, I'll put a piece of paper on here. I'll do a very simple drawing on top, take the paper off where I've drawn, that's where the acid will etch the plate, and then we'll clean it up, etch it, oil it up, ink it up, and print it. It'll be a beautiful little etching. Oh, so I did a little graphic drawing. Max took it away, etched it, brought it back. We inked it up and put it through the press, and it was a beautiful little line etching. Lloyd was absolutely fascinated. He said, I think, I could try that. And so that became his first exercise with Port Jackson Press. He actually went home, took out his sketchbooks from I think it was like 1932, when he first went to Europe on a boat, and he had all these little drawings of the stops along the way from Australia to England on the boat. And they became the very first, suite of etchings that he did with Port Jackson Press.
How brilliant.
Yeah, so it was a very sweet family affair. It was not coercive in any sense.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your work came to be part of, I guess I'm wondering if you sort of in effect commissioned yourself to produce the prints? Some of the ones that are in the exhibition are predominantly from the 80s.
Right. It was an effort for me to actually focus on doing my work.
I can imagine.
I would go home and I'd work in my studio painting. And it felt like it was, in a way, I didn't want to push my sensibility or my career. I wanted, if we were all going to be working together, I wanted it to be something that was valuable and useful, and could build a business for Whaling Road, for Miller Street Print Workshop, for Port Jackson Press, and for the artists. I didn't want to waste resources on my work. So it was only when it became clear that, my paintings were selling reasonably well through Waters Gallery, that I could afford the license or the indulgence of actually making something of my own. And they were relatively popular, and they became also part of the backbone of Port Jackson Press's financial strength.
And we're thrilled to represent them at the gallery.
Yes. Yeah.
We have to wrap up shortly, but I guess I'm wondering, is there any particular clear highlight that might stand out to you from your time at the press?
Look, I know it sounds like we were looking around for artists, eminent artists that we could consider to be more, stronger in the market. But that wasn't the case. We did a lot of work with a lot of different artists. John Money was one who came in who had absolutely no experience and very little even gallery experience, but I loved his drawings. So we did some wonderful, wonderful lithographs with him, and also younger artists who were my age at that time, John Peart and David Aspden. And these were not, sort of by any means commercial guarantees. These were, we were doing it because we wanted to represent a broad range of artists, not just the older, successful artists.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and we really appreciate you sharing the stories and reflections. It's been such a privilege.
I've got another 8 hours. Why don't
You've got another 8 hours? Well, we've loved hearing about your vision and your philosophy as an artist and publisher, and the collaborations. It's just been wonderful hearing about how it helped shape really what amounts to an incredibly important chapter in Australian printmaking. We hope our audience enjoys discovering, and absolutely, thank you, and perhaps rediscovering. Yeah, absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Look for the prints. Look out for the prints.
Absolutely. And we hope everyone will come down and visit the exhibition at Charles Nodrum Gallery and experience them firsthand. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.